Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something a little bit different today, a classic, actually. Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart.
Ah, a fantastic choice.
It's one of those stories that just sticks with you, doesn't it?
Definitely. I mean, who could forget that opening line, right?
Oh, absolutely. Talk about starting a story with a bang.
Right. True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad?
Chills, literal chills. Okay, so for anyone who maybe hasn't encountered this gem before, what's the basic setup?
So we have this unnamed narrator who, well, he's desperately trying to convince us he's sane, while at the same time detailing a murder.
Yeah, not exactly the most reliable narrator.
Exactly. Poe really plays with that concept of the unreliable narrator. He makes you question everything you're reading.
And that's what makes it so creepy. You're never quite sure if what you're reading is actually happening or just taking place in the narrator's head.
It's like he's playing with our minds.
Oh, absolutely. Right from the start, the narrator's practically screaming their sanity at us, talking about their heightened senses, almost bragging about them.
Yeah, and that's one of the most interesting things Poe does here. It's like the very act of insisting on your sanity kind of makes you question it, right?
Totally. Like, why are you trying so hard to convince me?
Right.
So is the narrator trying to convince us or themselves?
Oh, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then there's the old man. The narrator says they love him, but then they fixate on his eye, his vulture eye, as he calls it.
Yeah, that's a bit creepy. Doesn't sound very loving to me.
No, not at all. And that's where the symbolism comes in, right? It's not really about the eye itself.
What do you mean?
Well, the eye becomes this symbol, a representation of something deeper. It happens a lot in literature, like the evil eye in folklore.
Right, right. Representing harm or bad luck.
Exactly. And here, the narrator's fear of the eye, it seems way out of proportion to any actual threat. It's like he sees his own darkness reflected back at him.
So it's not about the old man's eye at all. It's about the narrator's own inner turmoil.
Exactly. He's projecting his own fears and guilt
Hmm.
onto this poor old man.
That's fascinating. And then there's the way he describes the murder. It's chillingly methodical. Like for 7 nights, he sneaks into the old man's room with a light.
Yeah, it's almost ritualistic, isn't it? This kind of, I don't know, this perverse kind of intimacy.
It's creepy, but during the act itself, things start to unravel.
Oh, yeah. At first, the narrator seems in control. He's got this plan and he's sticking to it. But as the old man's heartbeat gets louder and louder, his anxiety just skyrockets.
It's like the more he tries to control the situation, the more it spirals out of control.
Exactly. And then after the murder, we see this really strange mix of meticulousness
Yeah.
and paranoia.
Oh, yeah. He's super calculated about hiding the body, dismembering it, putting it under the floorboards.
Right. But at the same time, he becomes completely fixated on that heartbeat, even though it's gone.
So the heartbeat isn't just a sound, it's a symbol, right? What do you make of it?
It's the inescapable nature of guilt. It's like no matter how carefully you try to bury your crime, that evidence, that sound, it just persists.
That's deep. Okay, so this narrator is clearly coming undone. But before we get to his full-blown confession,
We got to talk about that scene with the police. Poe really knows how to turn up the tension.
that's for sure.
Yeah, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You know what's coming, but you can't look away.
It's incredible.
It's just masterful how he builds that suspense.
It really is. It's like, you're just waiting for him to totally lose it.
Right. And the narrator, he's practically vibrating with anxiety, pacing, ranting. He's convinced the police can hear the heartbeat too.
Oh, yeah. That's where he completely snaps, doesn't he? That fragile hold on reality is just gone.
Gone. He becomes a prisoner of his own guilt.
And those heightened senses, the ones he was bragging about at the beginning, well, they become instruments of torture.
Absolutely. It's like his senses are working against him, turning on him.
Makes me think of that line from Macbeth, sleep no more.
Oh, that's a good one.
He's haunted, totally tormented by what he's done.
Yeah, and that connection to Shakespeare, you're right on the money. Poe was definitely influenced by that whole Gothic tradition.
Right, right.
But he also brought in this psychological depth that was, well, pretty groundbreaking for his time. He was fascinated by the dark side of human nature. How reason can just crumble under pressure.
It's like he's saying, look, this darkness, it exists in all of us, and even the most meticulous plans, they can't save you from your own conscience.
Right.
But it's not just an abstract study of the human psyche, is it? I mean, the way Poe uses setting, it adds to that whole feeling of claustrophobia.
Oh, for sure. The story mostly takes place in the old man's house, right. And as the narrator's paranoia grows, that space, it just keeps getting smaller and smaller.
Right, right.
The darkness, the shadows, all those creaking floorboards, ugh, they all just add to this sense of impending doom.
You know, I never thought about it that way, but you're totally right. The house becomes a reflection of the narrator's mental state.
Yeah, it's like he's trapped, not only by his guilt, but by the physical environment too.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the confession.
Oh, man. Talk about a climax.
Poe's not shy away from the grotesque here.
No, he doesn't.
I mean, the narrator, he's convinced those police officers can hear the heartbeat, and he just completely breaks down. It's this eruption of guilt, fear, madness all at once.
It's a powerful scene. And here's the thing. Even though the narrator is a murderer, you almost feel sympathy for him.
I know, it's strange, isn't it?
It's a testament to Poe's skill as a writer that he can make you connect with such a deeply flawed character.
Absolutely. He makes us confront that darkness that exists within all of us. You know, he's not giving us answers or easy morals. He's exploring the complexities of human nature.
And that's what makes it so compelling.
Sure.
So what does it all mean? What are the key takeaways from the Telltale Heart? What should our listeners be thinking about? Well, we've covered some pretty dark territory today, but the Telltale Heart, it really gets under your skin.
It does, doesn't it?
It makes you think, like, what drives someone to do something so horrific?
Right. And, you know, the Telltale Heart, it works on so many levels. We've got the unreliable narrator, the symbolism, all that psychological intensity.
It's a lot to unpack.
It is, but it also makes you question, you know, our own perceptions.
Oh, interesting.
Like, how do we know what's real and what's imagined?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the narrator, he's so caught up in his own world, his own fears. You start to wonder about that line between sanity and madness.
Exactly. And remember, this was written way back in 1843.
Wow. Yeah, that's over 150 years ago.
Poe was way ahead of his time exploring these themes, you know, psychology and perception.
It's like he's saying, hey, maybe we're all unreliable narrators of our own lives to some extent.
I think that's one of the reasons this story, you know, continues to resonate with readers today. It taps into those universal anxieties, you know,
How about?
guilt, secrets, the things we try to hide from ourselves.
Makes you think, doesn't it? So what do you think Poe is trying to tell us with the Telltale Heart?
Well, you know, I don't think Poe was trying to give us any easy answers. I think he wanted us to, I don't know, to think, to question.
To really explore the dark side.
Yeah. The darker corners of the human experience. And the Telltale Heart, well, it does that brilliantly.
Agreed. I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just this. I think the Telltale Heart is one of those stories that really rewards multiple readings.
Oh, definitely.
Each time you come back to it, you might notice new details, new layers of meaning.
You know, it's funny, even though it's such a dark and disturbing story, there's something about it that just draws you back in.
It's the power of Poe.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive into the Telltale Heart. It's been a fascinating, if slightly unsettling journey. Until next time, keep those minds engaged and remember, sometimes the most fascinating truths are hidden in the darkest corners of the human heart.